everybody, Joe Workman here, and today we're going to introduce you to the new Feeds API stack. Now, before we dive in, what is an API? Essentially, an API is a way of giving programmatic access to some sort of data via pretty much the standard out there is called JSON. So this allows people to query and access data from your website programmatically. Maybe that's if they want to integrate with something like Zapier or Active Pieces, or they want to have their own custom script that basically integrates with data to run reports or whatnot. Okay. Feeds API makes creating your own custom JSON API a breeze. Let's dive in and have an actual look. I would say here we are in a web browser, and as you can see, this isn't your typical web page. All we see here is a bunch of data. Now, depending on what browser you're using, the data provided from a JSON API will look different. I have a very simple example that we're going to look at today. It just provides a few data points that we can then filter and sort through. Now, while you can use a browser to access this, I do recommend some other tools out there. So today I'm going to be using a tool called Rapid API to kind of play around with the API and kind of show you what we can do. So here I have an API. And basically what this is kind of like a textual browser, right? So here I put in the URL, and we could pass URL parameters. I have those turned off right now. But without any parameters, my API is returning 3 bits of data, okay? And now I do have to say that we do have the ability to have API keys. Okay, you can either have them in something called a HTTP header, or you can actually have an option to actually supply the API key via the URL. Okay, for security reasons, it's probably better to have it not in the URL, but it could be a better ease of use for your customers. Okay, so we have that option. Now, we also have the ability to do filters, just like we do with feeds. We can then do some URL-based filters. So here I'm going to filter for where the title contains bridge. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And we'll notice that in the URL, here is the URL. If I were to paste this URL in the browser, I'd get the same exact bit of data. But when I filter for title equals bridge, it returns the one result where bridge is actually in the title. Okay. Now there's a lot of really cool filters that we have with feeds, but this is just a simple one that kind of just says, hey, does this word contain? Now this is the actual feeds demo project, and inside there we'll see that we have a feeds API stack. Now feeds API is an add-on for the feed stack, so you will need to have the feed stack in order to use feeds API. It does add this new stack to our library though that we add to the page. Now, because it creates an API only page, Feeds API is really going to be the only thing that you have on this page. You shouldn't have anything else. So in here, I have, you can configure your data feeds. So in this example here, I just have a CSV feed, but you can configure, depending on what feeds add-ons you have, you can have it configured to a database or any other feeds add-on. So let's dive into the Feeds API stack settings here. You'll notice that at the beginning, we do have the ability to require API keys. If you don't want that, you can easily turn API keys off, and then your API will be available openly to the public. Now, as I said earlier, we can have API keys supplied via the X API key header, which if you notice here, when you hover over the tooltip, it actually kind of reminds you that you need to have the API key defined in that X API key authentication header. But again, if you want to have them supplied via the URL, you can do that as well. And then you can supply the actual URL parameter that needs to be added as the key. Okay, so here I would add key equals and then my API key to the URL in order for that to work. Now, this is where we configure all of our API keys. Now, here you create your own API keys that you want. It could be just some random strings or whatever you like. And it will be one API key per row, right? So you would just hit option return, and then you can do another API key, okay? A lot of times API keys, maybe if you want to be fancy, you can do something like 1Password to create some API keys for you. But yeah, you can add as many of them here as you would like. Now, one thing that's nice is if you wanted to remind yourself who has a particular API key, you can actually add comments into here. And so you can actually add, let's say above each API key, you can add a comment for who that API key is for. And all of these lines with the comments will be ignored. Essentially, any line that starts with a hashtag will be ignored. This is also a good way if you just want to like temporary, disable a particular API key. You can just prepend that with a hashtag and we're good to go. That API key is now disabled as long as you publish the page. Now, next up, if you're using Total CMS, you can actually integrate with Total CMS 1 and Total CMS 3. You just give it the object ID of the text area that contains all of your API keys. And the same syntax that we have up here is going to be applicable there. So this allows us to maybe manage our API keys online dynamically using Total CMS 1 or the new Total CMS 3. So the rest of the settings here are really kind of basic settings that are applicable to the feed stack. We have dedicated videos for those for sorting, so you can actually sort the data that is returned if you need to. As you saw earlier, we did a dynamic URL filter based on title. You can actually do multiple different things. There's a lot of different filter options. So you can add all of the filter options that Feeds has directly into your API. And remember, you also have the pre-filter feed here as well. So that you get, even if you have multiple filters, you can actually have many different filters if you want, optional or required, so that you can filter your feed in all kinds of ways. If you want to limit the amount of data that is returned, you can do that here. And then if you want to exclude some data from your feed in the API, you can do that as well. That's all with Feeds API. Super powerful tool. If a JSON API is something that you need, it's a no-brainer. Creating your own JSON API is difficult, but with Feeds API, it makes it done in minutes.